I'm Christine Cornels, and welcome to Land of Lincoln, Thy Wondrous Story. I'm sure you will enjoy the show, and just a few housekeeping items. I'm trying to see if you can hear me okay. A few housekeeping items, just make sure your cell phones are turned on to vibrate, and if you will, no pictures during the performance, but the actors can be available to take pictures with them afterwards. And also would like to, and there's some programs being handed out that are green, so you can see what stories you will be hearing this evening.
And no texting.
And no, yes, thank you.
No texting.
And no texting, because that's true. And wanted to introduce Cheryl Felicia Rhodes will be joining us in a minute. She is an actress who started out in Chicago, ended up in Hollywood for a number of years, I think 19, 20 years in Hollywood, and we're very fortunate to have her here in Northern Virginia. And there's a number of actors from the DC area here who are going to be presenting the story of Illinois. So I'd like to suggest a round of applause for Cheryl Felicia Rhodes and Land of Lincoln, Thy Wondrous Story.
Hi, and if anybody would like to come up and sit up closer, we could use some people in the front row here. Some folks like to move up closer, please. We have a few of you move up. Somebody please move up into the front row here. Great, thank you very much. Well, and we got the back door closed there. Close the back door. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Cheryl Felicia Rhodes, and I am from Illinois. Yay! And though Mark Twain was from Missouri, he visited with the members of the Illinois State Society at a reception on February 20th, 1868. Now, back then, our club was called the Illinois State Association. Twain wrote in his newspaper column, "The invitation I received was couched in such mysterious terms that I gathered from a vague notion that I was going there to report a sort of state agricultural society. And it was a very agreeable surprise to find a large party of gentlemen present who were not talking about steam plows and corn shellers, and a brilliant company of ladies who were taking no thought of prize turnips and miraculous cabbages. I like agriculture well enough, but not agricultural mass meetings. There is nothing about them that fires the blood." Well, tonight we hope to fire your blood, and we hope that you will find it an agreeable surprise that in addition to being the land of Lincoln and the home of many other presidents as well, and other persons of note, there are Illinoisans with colorful personalities whose lives have been, if you will, like lyrics in a song, and they make up the music that is Illinois.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Petrilla. I was president of Local 10 of the Chicago Musicians Union for 40 years. I was also president of the American Federation of Illinois for 18 years. I was born in Covert Street off Taylor in 1892, the son of an Italian-born city sewer worker. Never made it past the 4th grade, but I learned to play the trumpet at Hull House. Jane Addams herself gave me my first horn. But I never played it well. So in 1919, after I realized that my musical talents were limited, I became an organizer, an officer of the Chicago Federation of Musicians. The Federation elected me president in 1922, and I took over the National Union in 1940. And so I became a household name. But, not everybody liked my name. See, some said I was a tough guy. But I like to think it was because I stood up for the musician trying to make a living. Hey, I even took on Benito Mussolini when I sent Il Duce a cable demanding he reprimand his consul general in Chicago for hiring a non-union band. And yeah, I was the guy who kept musicians from making recordings during World War II when they were refused royalties by the guys making all the money. But look, forget all that. What's really important is the incredible musical history of Chicago. The great swing band leader, Benny Goodman, grew up on the West Side, and again, thanks to Jane Addams. Then he learned how to play the clarinet in Hull House when he was a kid. Then his drummer was Gene Krupa. He was known as the Chicago Flash. Gene became famous for that 9-minute drum solo during the Goodman Band performance of Sing, Sing, Sing in 1938. Chicago was the center of the jazz universe when Louis Armstrong moved here in 1922 to join the band of King Oliver. Nat King Cole moved here in 1921, attended DeSable High School, and became the first African-American entertainer to host his own TV show in 1956. Other great musicians from Illinois were Herbie Hancock, Miles Davis, singers Lou Rawls, Burl Ives, Mel Torme, the great gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, and the greatest French horn player in the world, Eric Russ. Yep, Illinois has been a great state for music, and I was a part of it all. I'm Jimmy Petrillo, and I was from Illinois.
I am Anne Rutledge, who sleeps beneath these weeds, beloved in life of Abraham Lincoln, wedded to him not through union, but through separation. In 1915, Illinois poet Edgar Lee Masters wrote those words about me in his Spoon River anthology. For if I had lived, I might have been engaged to marry Abraham Lincoln. In 1829, my father, along with John M. Cameron, founded New Salem, Illinois, which is where I met Abraham Lincoln. I was third of 10 children to Mary Ann Miller Rutledge and James Rutledge. We had a large family. According to our family history, one of our many descendants was Herbert Walton Rutledge from Alton, Illinois. Herbert Walton Rutledge was president of the Illinois State Society from 1919 to 1923. In 1835, but that was long before after my time. In 1835, a deadly wave of typhoid fever hit the town of New Salem. I was one of its victims at the age of 22 years old. And so I never lived to see that Abraham Lincoln, that I knew from Illinois, become one of our nation's greatest presidents. And yet, I knew. I am Anne Rutledge, and I was from New Salem, Illinois.
Hello, my name is Dred Scott. I was born a slave. My first owner sold me to a U.S. Army surgeon in 1830. I lived with the doctor from 1833 to 1836 in Rock Island, Illinois. When the doctor died in 1846, I tried to buy my freedom from the widow's doctor, but she refused. Because Illinois was a free state, I sued for my freedom in a federal court. That first court decided in my favor and declared that I was a free man. But the widow appealed that ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court, which reversed the lower court by a vote of 7-2. The 7 justices in the majority were slave owners themselves. To make matters much worse, not only did the Supreme Court rule against me, but Chief Justice Roger Towner wrote in his majority opinion that no black man had any right to sue in the federal courts because black Americans were not citizens of the country. He did not cite any provision of the Constitution to support his purely personal opinion. This outraged people all over the North. It was a major factor that led up to the Civil War. Eventually, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and the 13th Amendment nullified the Dred Scott decision. I was a free man for the last 18 months of my life. I am Dred Scott, and I am from Rock Island, Illinois.
I was
called Aunt Lizzie Aiken when from Peoria I volunteered in 1861 as a nurse for the head surgeon of the 6th Illinois Cavalry at Shawneetown. I wore no uniform and had no rank or title, but I tended to the sick and ailing soldiers. When a young private asked the surgeon, "What do we call this kind lady?" the surgeon replied, "Aunt Lizzie. We just call her Aunt Lizzie. I'm Lizzie Aiken, but you can just call me Aunt Lizzie from Illinois."
My real name is Mary Harris, but people often call me Mother Jones. I was born in Cork, Ireland in 1837, but I often claim to be born 7 years earlier. I moved with my family to Chicago during the Civil War to make me living as a dressmaker and teacher. But in 1867, I lost my husband and 4 children to the yellow fever. And 4 years later, I lost my home, my dress shop, and everything I owned in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. I was all alone. So, I started to work as an organizer for the Knights of Labor and the United Mine Workers of America. A district attorney once called me the most dangerous woman in America for organizing the miners. Some reporters called me a humanitarian for taking care of the needs of miners. But I replied, "I'm not a humanitarian, I'm a hellraiser." Women who campaigned for the vote were annoyed with me when I said, "You don't need to vote to raise hell." Some modern feminists are still horrified that I also once said, "Working men deserved a wage that would allow women to stay home to take care of their kids." But I was a woman of me times, and proud of it. When I died at the age of 93 in 1930, I was buried at the Union Cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois, among Southern Illinois coal miners who lost their lives in strike violence in 1898. I am Mary Harris, also known as Mother Jones, and I was from Illinois.
Hello. My real name is James Butler, but see, most folks remember me by my nickname, Wild Bill Hickok. Now, y'all might be surprised to know I was born in the tiny town of Homer, Illinois, in LaSalle County. Today, Homer's called Troy Grove. I was a lawman and Indian fighter. As a sometimes lawman, I was involved in many gunfights and had my share of enemies. On August 2nd, 1876, I was playing poker at the Number 10 Saloon in Deadwood, Dakota Territory. One of my enemies, broken-nosed Jack McCall, came through the back door of the saloon and shot me in the back. At the time, I was holding a pair of aces and a pair of eights. Ever since then, poker hand of aces and eights is known in poker legends and folklore as the dead man's hand. I'm Wild Bill Hickok, and I was from Illinois.
My name is Oscar Mishaw, and I was born near Metropolis, Illinois, one of 11 children of former slaves. And as a boy, I shined shoes and worked as a porter on the railway. As a young man, I successfully homesteaded a farm in an all-white area of South Dakota, where I began writing. I formed my own publishing company, where I sold my books door to door. The advent of the motion picture industry intrigued me and provided me a vehicle to tell my stories. I formed my own movie production company, and in 1919 became the first African American to make a film. I used autobiographical elements in The Exile, the first feature film with sound, in which the central character leaves Chicago to buy and operate a ranch in South Dakota. In 1924, I introduced the movie-going world to Paul Robeson in his film Body and Soul. The Producers Guild of America has called me the most prolific black, if not the most prolific independent filmmaker in American cinema. During my career, I wrote, produced, and directed 44 feature-length films between 1919 and 1948, and wrote 7 novels, one of which became a national bestseller. My name is Oscar Mishaw, and I was from Illinois.
Hello, my name is Elliot Ness. I was born in Chicago in 1903, and my parents were immigrants from Norway. I graduated from Fanger High School on the south side and graduated from the University of Chicago in 1925. After some years, I worked in the University of Chicago to earn a master's degree in criminology. In 1927, my brother-in-law Alexander Jamie was an agent for the Bureau of Investigation that later became the FBI in 1935. Alexander persuaded me to join the Prohibition Bureau of the Treasury Department. Now, after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929, Chicago business leaders were worried that people would be too afraid of gangland violence to bring their families to Chicago's World's Fair, which was then being planned for 1933. So they appealed to President Herbert Hoover for special help, and Hoover gave the job of bringing down Al Capone to Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon. Now, Mellon directed me to set up a special team of only 15 Prohibition agents that newspapers called the Untouchables, because we could not be corrupted by bribes from gangsters. We used the Volstead Act to destroy the breweries and speakeasies that were the source of Al Capone's money and power. Then the U.S. Attorney used our evidence to convict Al Capone of income tax evasion in 1931. With Capone in federal prison and the streets of Chicago safe again, more than 39 million people did visit the Century of Progress World's Fair in 1933 and 1934. And the fair was a huge success, even with money in short supply during the Great Depression. A fictional TV series and a movie, both with the title The Untouchables, was loosely based on the memoirs of our work of our special team in Chicago. After World War II, I finished my career as the Director of Public Safety for Cleveland, Ohio. My name is Elliot Ness, and I was one of the most famous law enforcement agents in Illinois history.
Hello, my name is Bessie Coleman. I was born and raised in Texas, but in 1915 I moved to Chicago at the age of 23 and became a citizen of Illinois. When I heard the stories of pilots who came back from World War I, my dream was to become a pilot myself. But because I was a woman of African American heritage, I could not find anyone in Chicago who would teach me to fly. So the publisher of the Chicago Defender suggested I travel to Paris, France, in order to take lessons there. So I took French lessons at the Berlitz School in Chicago and sailed for Paris in 1920. In 1921, I became not only the first African American woman, but the first American, period, of either gender or race to earn an international aviator's license to fly. This was several years before anyone ever heard of white American pioneers in aviation, such as Charles Lindbergh or Amelia Earhart. I returned to Chicago in the fall of 1921, but I still could not find any teacher to give me advanced flying lessons. So I went back to Paris a second time in 1922 for more advanced lessons. In 1923, I became a celebrity who earned money as a stunt flyer and air show daredevil before large crowds, including at the Checkerboard Airdrome that is now called Chicago Midway Airport. In 1943, Janet Harmon Bragg of Robbins, Illinois, was the first African American woman to earn a commercial pilot's license. Janet helped form the Challenger Aero Club for black aviators and wrote a column on aviation for the Chicago Defender. I never met Janet, but she said that I was her inspiration and role model. In 1966, actress Nichelle Nichols, also from Robbins, Illinois, said that both Janet and I were role models for her when she played the role of Lieutenant Uhura aboard the USS Enterprise on the first Star Trek TV show. Nichelle's role was groundbreaking on television. At one point, when she considered leaving the TV series, Martin Luther King Jr. personally praised Nichelle's work and asked her to please remain with the show as she was an inspiration to young black women. Finally, in 1992, more than 60 years after I died, Dr. Mae Jemison of Chicago became the first African American woman to orbit the Earth in space, and she also said that her role models were Bessie Coleman, Janet Harmon Bragg, and Nichelle Nichols, because we taught her that dreams can come true. Just imagine that. I never, ever dreamed that people would travel in space, but I was a role model to young African American women many decades beyond my lifetime who did travel in space. I am Bessie Coleman, and along with Janet Harmon Bragg and Nichelle Nichols and Mae Jemison, we are all African American women pioneers in aviation and space from Illinois.
My name is Jane Addams, and I was born in 1860 in Cedarville, Illinois. My father was a founding member of the Illinois Republican Party, served as an Illinois state senator. He was also a friend of Abraham Lincoln. Father kept a letter from Lincoln in his desk, and I loved to look at it as a child. In my teens, I had big dreams and longed to do something useful in the world. I was interested in the poor from my readings of Charles Dickens. After I attended Rockford Female Seminary, now Rockford College, in Rockford, Illinois, I co-founded Hull House in the slums of Chicago in 1889. I was a creator, an innovator, and a leader. Everything I needed to be in order to cultivate the generosity of patrons. Money poured in. Within a few years, Hull House offered medical care, child care, and legal aid. It also provided classes for immigrants to learn English, vocational skills, music, art, and drama. In 1893, a severe depression rocked the country. Hull House served over 2,000 people per week. I lobbied the state of Illinois to examine laws governing child labor, the factory inspection system, and the juvenile justice system. But I became a controversial figure. When horrible working conditions led to the Haymarket riot, I was personally attacked for my support of the workers. It resulted in a great loss of donor support for Hull House. But I supplemented Hull House funding with revenue from lecture tours and article writing. My first book was published in 1910, and others followed. I received numerous awards, and in 1931, I became the first woman, American woman, to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. I continued to work until my death in 1935. Thousands of people came to my funeral at Hull House before I was taken back to Cedarville to be buried. My name is Jane Addams, and I am from Illinois.
My name is Congressman Henry Riggs Rathbone, and I was president of the Illinois Society from 1927 to 1928. My year as president of the society was a happy one. Born in 1870, I graduated from Phillips Exeter and then Yale University in 1892. My mother was Clara Harris, daughter of Senator Ira Harris of New York, and my father was Major Henry Rathbone. My parents were formally engaged 2 years before they were married in 1867, and as an engaged couple, they were invited to sit in the presidential box at Ford's Theater on the night of April 14, 1865, with President and Mrs. Abraham Lincoln as they watched the last performance of Our American Cousin starring Laura Keene. As you know, John Wilkes Booth came in a door behind President Lincoln and used a derringer to mortally wound the president in the head as he sat holding hands with Mrs. Lincoln. Booth then scrambled around Mrs. Lincoln and my mother and used a knife to cut the arm of my father as they struggled, before jumping 11 feet from my parents' side of the box to the stage below. Witnesses said Booth shouted, "Sic Semper Tyrannis," and broke his leg in the fall. Many chapters of my life were tragic, but the most tragic of all was the day before Christmas in 1883. Our family was living in Germany, where my father was an American diplomat. Many years of stress and mental anguish from both the Civil War and his struggle with Booth caused father to lose his mind, and on that day, kill my mother in a rage. However, he could not find us children, and therefore could do us no harm. Father lived the rest of his life in a prison for the criminally insane and died there in 1911. But I was admitted to the Illinois bar in 1895 and served Illinois in Congress from 1922 until my death in June 1928. My name is Congressman Henry Riggs Rathbone, and I was president of the Illinois State Society.
I am Oscar Stanton DePriest. My parents were former slaves. I moved to Chicago in 1889, where I worked as a real estate broker. I also made a lot of money in the stock market. I served from 1915 to 1917 as Chicago's first black alderman. In 1928, I was the first African American ever elected to Congress from any northern state. When my wife, Jessie, and I moved to Washington in 1929, First Lady, Mrs. Herbert Hoover, invited Jessie to the traditional tea for congressional wives at the White House. Wives of the Southern members threatened to boycott the tea if Jessie came. Mrs. Hoover was a Quaker, and she was not about to put up with that. So Mrs. Hoover implied that she would have tea with Jessie alone if none of the other white ladies attended. Mrs. Hoover came up with a strategy. She split the invitations into 4 teas instead of one big event. This way, she kept the biggest off balance because they did not know which tea Jessie was invited to attend. So, my Jessie attended the 3rd tea without any incident, and the boycott fell apart. My name is Oscar Stanton DePriest, and I was a congressman from Illinois.
Hello, I am Mary Logan Tucker, a fellow member of the Illinois State Society. The last time I spoke to this society was on March 16th, 1938, when we met at the Willard Hotel. That night we were worried about flooding where the Ohio and Wabash rivers join in Gallatin County, and we're hoping that the federal government could find enough money to move the residents of Shawneetown inland to higher ground. I reported on my recent trip to Japan without any hint that we might be at war with that nation in just 4 years. My father was Democratic Congressman John A. Logan of Murfreesboro, Illinois. My father was the founder of Memorial Day in 1868, when he was the commander of the Grand Army of the Republic Veterans Organization. Father was elected U.S. Senator from Illinois, this time as a Republican, in 1871, and he was nominated by the GOP for Vice President of the United States in 1884. The John A. Logan Community College, Logan Square in Chicago, and Logan Circle here in Washington, D.C., are all named for my father, who is also buried here at the Logan Tomb on the grounds of the Old Soldiers and Sailors Home. My father is also mentioned in the official state song of Illinois. My mother, Mary Cunningham Logan, was also a member of this society. Mother was a friend of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton. Mother and I were both present with society members in 1900 when President McKinley dedicated the statue of my father in what is now called Logan Circle. I am Mary Logan Tucker, and I was from Illinois.
My name is Enrico Fermi. I was born in Rome in 1921, and when I was a teen, I began to study physics. During my university years, I studied mathematics, quantum mechanics, and atomic physics. In 1924, I became a professor of physics at the University of Rome. In 1938, I was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, but by that time we were worried that even though I was baptized a Roman Catholic in childhood, the Jewish heritage of my wife Laura might pose a danger to her if we returned to fascist Italy. So Laura and I and our children went to Stockholm to accept the Nobel Prize, but we never returned to Italy. We emigrated instead to New York, where I became a professor at Columbia University. In 1941, we moved to Chicago, where I could teach physics at the University of Chicago and work on development of an atomic pile as part of the Chicago Metallurgical Laboratory Division of the Manhattan Project to build the first atomic bomb. Robert Oppenheimer and I were both called father of the atomic bomb because on December 7, 1942, I started the first controlled nuclear chain reaction in a cement squash court under the football stands at the stadium named for the great football coach Amos Alonzo Stagg. I became an American citizen and continued to do my research and teach at the University of Chicago until my death in 1954 at the age of 53. The Fermi Lab in Batavia, Illinois, was named in my honor. My name is Enrico Fermi, and I started the atomic age when I lived in Chicago.
I'm Agnes Ayers from Carbondale, Illinois, and I was an actress who played steamy love scenes with silent film star Rudolph Valentino, also known as a Latin lover and the sex symbol of the 1920s. I got into films in Chicago with SNA Studios while I was studying in school and began playing extra and bit parts. I achieved fame playing Lady Mayo opposite Rudolph Valentino in The Sheik. And I also co-starred in his sequel, Son of the Sheik. But this was the last film for Valentino, and he suddenly died at the age of 31. And his death caused mass hysteria among his female fans. I retired the following year. By then I was a wealthy woman, but the stock market crash of 1929 wiped me out. I returned to Hollywood to try to resume my career, but I could only find uncredited roles in the talkies, so I left the movies for good. I am Agnes Ayers, star of the silent screen, and I was from Illinois.
My name is Ralph Metcalf. I was a member of the Illinois State Society. In 1932, I won the bronze medal for running the 200-meter race in 10.3 seconds at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in a virtual tie with my rival Eddie Tolan. But Eddie was awarded the gold medal when officials examined the photograph of the finish line. It was that close. When the next Olympic Games were held in Berlin in 1936, I ran second to Jesse Owens in the 100 meters, and I won the gold medal winning the 4x100 meter relay. Jesse and I won our medals with Adolf Hitler himself watching from the stands. Hitler was very unhappy that two African-American athletes won top medals at the games that he wanted to use for propaganda to showcase Nazi superiority. I served in the Army during World War II and became a successful businessman in Chicago. In 1949, I was elected to the Chicago City Council, and I served as an advisor to Governor Adlai E. Stevenson on athletics. I was elected in Chicago in Congress from 1971 to 1978, and I attended several events of the Illinois State Society, including our reception on September 24th, 1974, when President Gerald Ford paid us a surprise visit to honor retiring members of Congress from Illinois. My name is Ralph Metcalf, Olympic gold medal winner, teacher, coach, businessman, public servant, and a member of the Illinois State Society.
My name is Jim Jordan. I was born in Peoria, Illinois in 1896.
And he met me, Marion Driscoll Jordan, when we both attended the same Catholic church in Peoria.
In high school, I played basketball with Fulton Sheen, who later became famous as Bishop Fulton Sheen when he started his own national TV show in the 1950s. After high school, I married Marion, and we started a tour on our own vaudeville act. Eventually, we took our comedy characters to Chicago radio stations, where we were sponsored by O. Henry Candy Bars.
In 1935, we started to play our characters, Fibber McGee and Molly, on NBC Radio. We were very popular with millions of Americans who desperately needed to laugh during the Depression.
Every week, I would open my overstuffed hall closet and listeners would hear the loud crash of pots and pans as they poured out on the hall floor in radio's first situation comedy.
As my character, Molly McGee, I would often say one of the first national catchphrases. You see, when Molly disapproved of one of Fibber's schemes, she would say, "'Tain't funny, McGee." Our cast featured many other famous characters, including Throckmorton P. Gildersleeve, who was played by Harold Perry. Perry started radio's first spin-off show when he left ours to start The Great Gildersleeve.
Our fans were so loyal that our show continued for 24 years until 1959, long after the golden age of radio. My name is Jim Jordan.
And I'm Marion Driscoll Jordan, and we were from Illinois. We were comedy pioneers in network radio.
Our characters of Fibber McGee and Molly.
Hey, Funny McGee.
Hello. My name is Marjorie Merriweather Post. My father was Charles F. Post, the inventor of grape nuts and Postum coffee substitute. I was born in Springfield, Illinois on March 15, 1897, when my father was owner of a farm equipment company. Father lost his first fortune, and we moved to Battle Creek, Michigan, to locate the Postum Cereal Company. My father died when I was 27 years old, and I inherited his company. I had already married and divorced my first husband, Edward Bennett Close, when father died. One daughter of my first marriage was Eleanor Post Hutton, who married film director Preston Sturges. My first husband was the paternal grandfather of the actress Glenn Close. I married my second husband, financier E.F. Hutton, in 1920. He became the CEO of our company that was later called Post Cereals. My second husband and I developed a large variety of foods, including Bird's Eye frozen foods. Then, in 1929, we founded the General Foods Company. My only daughter with Hutton was the actress Dina Merrill, and Hutton and I divorced in 1935. That same year, I married my third husband, attorney Joseph E. Davies, who was the first chairman of the Federal Trade Commission and American ambassador to the Soviet Union, Luxembourg, and Belgium, as well as an advisor to Presidents Roosevelt and Truman. While we lived in Moscow, I purchased a large number of Fabergé eggs and other Russian imperial art that had once belonged to the Romanov family. Part of that collection is now on display at my Washington home called Hillwood. Some of my jewelry is on display with the Harry Winston collection at the Smithsonian. Davies and I were divorced in 1955, and by this time, I was the wealthiest woman in the world. I married my fourth and last husband, Herbert A. May of Pittsburgh, in 1958. I owned many homes and was a benefactor of many schools and arts venues. The outdoor concert venue, Merriweather Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland, is named for me. I am Merriweather Marjorie Meriwether Post, and I was a native of Central Illinois.
Hi, folks. My name's Bill Veck. That's right. All you guys know me. You know how to pronounce my name because my autobiography says Veck rhymes with wreck. I grew up in Hinsdale, Illinois, and when my dad was a general manager of the Chicago Cubs in the 1930s, I helped to plant the famous vines on the walls of Wrigley Field. Yes, everybody loves Wrigley Field, but not too much. When I grew up, I became a baseball team owner and promoter because I love baseball so much. In 1951, as the owner of the old St. Louis Browns, I hired a midget named Eddie Goodell. He's the bat for our team. You see, Eddie was only 3 feet 7 inches tall. And he only batted once because he drew a walk when the pitcher couldn't even find the strike zone. I was famous for some other stunts, such as inventing the exploding scoreboard when I owned the Chicago White Sox. But I was not to blame for the most famous stunt connected to the White Sox. Oh no. 40 years after the White Sox scandal, we won the American League pennant in 1959. Chicago Fire Commissioner Robert Quinn was a White Sox fan. And he was so happy about our win over Cleveland that he set off the air raid sirens all over Chicago to celebrate. See, Quinn didn't realize that some Chicagoans, at the peak of the Cold War, might think the air raid sirens could mean the Russian bombers were over Wisconsin on their way south. And in minutes, the church is filled with old ladies wearing babushkas and desperately holding on to their rosaries. Well, the next day, Quinn apologized for setting off a panic just to celebrate a big White Sox win. Just remember, all of you out there are only 2 seasons in baseball. Winter, and then baseball, of course. My name is Bill Veck, and I grew up in Hinsdale, Illinois. Thank you. Go Sox!
My name is Ernie Banks of the Chicago Cubs. After Jackie Robinson broke the barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers, I became the first African-American baseball player to sign with the Cubs. I played all my major league career with the Cubs from 1953 to 1971. I played both shortstop and first base and was twice named most valuable player in the National League. During my career, I hit 512 home runs, including 5 Grand Slam home runs in just 1 season. Whew. When I retired, my number 14 also retired. In 1977, I was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. In 2001, I was honored by the Illinois State Society with an Outstanding Illinois Award. My name is Ernie Banks, and I'm also known and beloved as Mr. Cub.
My name is Ambassador Donald McHenry from East St. Louis, Illinois. And in 2001, I was honored as an outstanding Illinoisan by the Illinois State Society. I graduated from Illinois State University at Normal in 1957 and earned a master's degree from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale in 1959. I worked for the State Department in the 1960s and served for several foreign policy think tanks in the 1970s, including the Brookings Institute and the Council of Foreign Relations. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter appointed me as Deputy Representative to the United Nations Security Council. You see, the post for ambassador to the UN was vacant at the time when I generated a lot of publicity by stopping a Soviet airliner for taking off at JFK Airport in New York because we needed to find out if a Russian ballerina was being taken against her will back to Moscow after her husband had defected to the U.S. the day before. My actions were noticed by President Carter, who then appointed me U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I was the third ambassador to the UN to come from the state of Illinois. The other two were former Governor Adlai E. Stevenson of Libertyville and former Justice Arthur Goldberg from Chicago. I am Don McHenry, and I am definitely from Illinois.
My name is Dr. Mona Khanna, and I'm a triple board certified medical doctor and an Emmy Award winning journalist from Fox News in Chicago. I have a special history and friendship with the Illinois State Society because I was the Illinois Cherry Blossom Princess in 1988. Yes. And this society also gave me the Outstanding Illinoisan Award at the Illinois Inaugural Gala in 2005. I have also finished first and second in multiple Chicago sprint triathlons and marathons. After immigrating with my family from India to Chicago, I started using English as a second language in grammar school. I ultimately graduated as valedictorian from Joyce Kilmer Public School in Rogers Park, and then received top honors from Arlington High School in Arlington Heights. At Northwestern University, I attended the Medill School of Journalism. I later graduated from medical school at the University of Illinois, where I am now a visiting clinical associate professor in the Department of Medicine. I travel annually on medical missions to work as a disaster volunteer, for which this year I received the 2013 American College of Physicians Volunteerism Award. I was also one of the first volunteer physicians to report to Ground Zero in New York after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. My name is Dr. Mona Khanna, and I'm a special friend of the Illinois State Society.
Hello, my name is John Wentworth. People call me Long John Wentworth because I stood over 6 feet tall, and that was very unusual for the 1850s. I was a farmer and a real estate developer in what is now called the Garfield Ridge neighborhood. And I was the editor and publisher of the Chicago Democrat newspaper. I represented Illinois in Congress as a Democrat for 5 terms, from 1843 to 1855. But in 1855, I joined the new Republican Party and became the first Republican to be elected mayor of Chicago in 1857. I was famous in my time for my eloquent introduction of Edward Albert, the Prince of Wales. See, when he came to Chicago for a visit in 1860, I took the prince to the second story of the balcony of Tremont House Hotel so he could be seen by a large crowd that had gathered down below. In introducing our first royal visitor, I simply said, "Boys, this is the prince." "Prince, these are the boys, huh?" I'm Long John Wentworth, and I was both the 19th and 21st mayor of Chicago.
And these are but a few Illinoisans whose stories tell of our state heritage. We thank Mark Rhodes for celebrating these individuals in his book, Land of Lincoln, Thy Wondrous Story. May these stories illuminate for future generations that the land of Lincoln, the state of Illinois, also belongs to many, and it belongs to you.
Larry Hunt.
Latanya Sinkler.
Brad Fun.
I'm Mark Arnold.
Mary Hyman.
Glenn Ford.
Tony Williams.
Gail Nina.
And I'm Vincent Morrow.